Welcome to the Nation Diplomatic Dispatch, your window into the world of diplomacy and international affairs. Today, we spotlight the enduring friendship between Malaysia and the Philippines, two close neighbours bound by shared history, culture, and ASEAN collaboration. Joining us is Her Excellency Maria Angela Ponce, Ambassador of the Republic of the Philippines to Malaysia. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Hello, Daniel. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here with us today. If I may jump right into it and ask, this year, 2025, marks the 61st year of diplomatic relations between Malaysia and the Philippines, which started back in 1964. Now, as Ambassador of the Philippines to Malaysia, what do you think has kept this relationship resilient and meaningful over the decades?
Indeed, we celebrate our 61st year anniversary today, following the 60th anniversary of our relations last year, which was highlighted by the exchange of visits of our foreign ministers and the convening of what we call the Joint Commission meeting, which is the highest institutional mechanism that oversees and reviews our bilateral relations. I think, our relations remain robust because it is built on mutual respect and coordination in security, trade, and people-to-people ties, as well as, of course, the bond that we have as founding members of ASEAN.
And now Malaysia this year is chairman of ASEAN, and both our countries are founding members of the bloc. How is the Philippines working with Malaysia and others in ASEAN to address current challenges? Perhaps if you could get your thoughts on economic integration and the sustainability aspects of these joint efforts.
Yes. The Philippines, of course, is working closely, not just with Malaysia, but with all our other ASEAN members to support and help Malaysia, in its goal of having inclusivity and sustainability for ASEAN. In terms of economic integration, there are quite a number of initiatives that are in line in which we are supporting Malaysia, and this includes the signing of the ASEAN-China FTA or Free Trade Agreement upgrade later this year, as well as the substantial conclusion of the review of the ATIGA, what we call the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement. And then we also have ITIGA, the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement, in which under ATIGA, the Philippines leads one of the works on standards and legal issues. Aside from that, we also are working on the development of the implementation roadmap for e-vehicles, which is very important, as well as a framework for integrated semiconductor supply chain. So all of this, are capitalizing on ASEAN as a bloc, as a regional bloc, and as a, what they call as the fourth strongest or biggest economy in the world.
How's your working relationship been with your counterparts, not just the other ambassadors within the region, but also with the, for example, Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Malaysia?
Well, I've been in Malaysia a year and a half. I think so. Yeah. And I've had excellent working relationships with, not just with the foreign ministry, but also with all of the other ministries that we engage with. Among the ASEAN members here, we have very strong work together as well. We coordinate with each other. We ask each other, tips on how to proceed when there are certain projects. So very, very strong, and I welcome that. That's a very open dialogue as well. When we need something and when they need something, it's very engaging. So very happy with the support that I've received here.
And that's really encouraging to hear, because we know even among, of course, between ASEAN countries, I think the relationship tends to be quite strong, and the bloc often talks about being together in facing challenges that we see happening around us. And this brings me to my next point on a question on security and strategic opportunities. Now, we know that the South China Sea remains a key concern in regional diplomacy, with Malaysia and the Philippines having a stake in both the peaceful navigation and maritime sovereignty, the impacts on the exclusive economic zone, the right of our fishermen to ply their trade and earn a living, and all of this has implications, politically, economically, for various stakeholders. Now, how can we work more closely to de-escalate tensions and protect our national interests while maintaining dialogue with major powers, in this particular case, China?
Well, maritime security as well as the sustainability of marine resources both are very important. I think not just to the Philippines but to Malaysia as well, and to the whole of ASEAN. So with Malaysia at the bilateral level, we, as you said, we have constant dialogue on this. But on the South China itself, we recognize that this is, a regional concern. The situation in South China is a regional concern, and so we are addressing it at the regional level through ASEAN, and particularly through the negotiations on the Code of Conduct, of which, of course, Malaysia is currently the coordinator, together with China, and as well as overall, Malaysia is also the coordinator of ASEAN-China relations. The Code of Conduct is very important because that is where everyone, sits at the same table, China included, to discuss, how to manage the situation in South China Sea. How do we move forward in addressing the situations that come up? It is also in the negotiations of the Code of Conduct that we are able to air out to each other, our differences and our concerns. And I always say, what's important, people say, the Code of Conduct is moving so slowly. Is it really something that can provide, any solution? As for me, as long as we are sitting at the table, hearing each other out and listening to each other, that is very important.
Right.
And I think that under Malaysia's chairship, there's been quite an advancement in the talks in the Code of Conduct. So we remain committed to that, and we remain committed to other initiatives under ASEAN that would address that. In terms of engaging the major powers, both, again, as I said, at the bilateral level, we have many mechanisms of engaging with China. But at the same time, as I said, the Code of Conduct, it's not just the 10 ASEAN states that are there. China is also on the table, and that's very important.
If I may ask then on the Code of Conduct, which I believe was the declaration first came up, was mooted in the early 2002, 2003, if I'm not mistaken. And there's questions about whether a binding code of conduct might be achieved by the end of this particular Malaysian chairmanship. Do you see that kind of consensus being arrived at, keeping in mind that the alignment the national alignment of different ASEAN members can be quite different in that regard? What are your thoughts?
Whether the Code of Conduct should be binding is one of what we call, this landmark issues of the Code of Conduct negotiations, and that remains to be seen. It's not all ASEAN members have the same perspectives, but also there are different concerns on what would best suit the ASEAN situation, whether it would be a binding code of conduct or a non-binding code of conduct. But what's important is that there is consensus on that. And I think, as I said, under Malaysia's chairship, the discussions on that have really moved significantly forward.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those insights. I'd like to move on a little bit to looking at other areas of economic cooperation, which we've seen have been expanding, right? From trade and investments to areas like the halal industry, tourism, digital innovation. I was reading earlier that there was something like 6 million tourists in the Philippines. The target is 7.7 million within the next year or two. So what sectors do you see as having the biggest opportunities for Malaysia, Philippines economic collaboration?
As you have already indicated, halal cooperation, tourism, and the digital economy. These were identified by both President Marcos Jr. and Prime Minister Anwar in their exchange of visits as priorities for our bilateral cooperation. And in terms of that, so much advancement has already been made. For instance, in halal, we've benefited very much from capacity building for our personnel, as well as learning about the Malaysia's halal ecosystem, which is one of the best in the world and one of the leading in the world. In terms of tourism, as you said, we've been working on increasing that. Malaysia is already one of our top 10, in terms of inbound tourists. But with also now expanding on Islamic tourism, being able to provide, and this goes together with halal cooperation, being able to provide, halal certified facilities opportunities, so that then, we have more to offer for the Malaysian public, as well as for the Islamic public that comes to Malaysia, for precisely because Malaysia has that ecosystem for Islamic tourism. That's the second one. A third one would be Islamic finance. Last year, our central bank did a roadshow here in Malaysia to invite Malaysian institutions and banks to invest in the Philippines, because we already have an enabling law for Islamic finance. We have the incentives in place, and we see. We've told the institutions here, Islamic finance is not just for the Muslim population of the Philippines, but for the entire population, because it's the core principles of Islamic finance. It's ESG. So we look forward. We're very optimistic on that front.
Right. Now, that's a very nice perspective. Now, just to kind of take a very quick step back, if there were 3 top areas you'd recommend Malaysian tourists to visit, what would they be? Whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim tourists, where would it be?
Well, of course, we're known for having some of the best beaches and islands in the world. So, of course, I'd recommend Boracay. Which is not just very family friendly, has lots to offer, but also has the first halal friendly institution and establishment, and so that's one. And then of course El Nido, Palawan. El Nido, Palawan, again, best very good islands and beaches, and also quite a number of snorkeling and diving, so very good marine life that can be seen there. I know that Malaysians are very fond of diving, and actually that's what many Malaysians go to the Philippines for. So there would also be corollary to that, the Tubataha reefs, which are the best reef, I would say, in the world. And then of course, because I come from the north, which would be the Cordilleras, I would recommend the Banawe rice terraces. Truly, I think one of the wonders of the world, and it also it's a contrast to us being just beaches, and so, but the Banawe rice terraces, which is a feat really by the Ifugaos.
There's definitely a lot for us to discover in the Philippines, certainly. Now, on that, leading on for an economic point, are there any trade delegations or new agreements or joint ventures that Malaysians should be aware of, opportunities that Malaysian businesses or SMEs should take with regards to the Philippines?
Our trade and investment office here is leading an investment delegation to the Philippines in November. So we hope that opens and expands opportunities for investment in the Philippines, inbound and outbound as well. And then of course we also, like Malaysia, hold quite a number of MICE events. We are having, for instance, in a few weeks' time, what we call the IFEX, or the International Food Exhibition, that will be held on 22 to 24 May. And in terms of furniture and the furniture industry, the Philippines is very well known for what we call Manila Fame. It's our premier trade show for quality home, fashion, and lifestyle products, and that will be on 16 to 18 October in Manila. So I think those are the 3 things that we'd like to invite you to come here, to join.
Now, I'd like to move on to a bit about culture. We've been speaking about that a little bit, and we can say cultural diplomacy has really flourished, right? Your 60th anniversary last year, I think there were a lot of events, art exhibitions, university partnerships, heritage showcases, like the Mindanao Islamic Art Exhibition here in Kuala Lumpur. Why do you think that people-to-people ties are so important in today's diplomacy?
Well, I think, I agree that people, and I strongly believe that people-to-people ties are important, not just in today's diplomacy, but all throughout history. Because for me, all relations between countries, whether on a bilateral or regional level, are founded on people-to-people relations, on having strong people-to-people ties. Without that, you cannot have economic relations or political relations without the grounding of strong people-to-people ties. Which is why, for me, cultural diplomacy is very important, because that strengthens the bonds between the people, and at the same time, opens the people's eyes that there is so much commonality between us. In the culture, when we see the culture that we share, we see that we're not much different from each other. and then that opens it to again stronger ties that actually feed onto the government to government level relations. Yeah.
And speaking of which, I think many viewers may not know that a Filipino musician, Alfonso Soliano's daughter Rachel, helped arrange and harmonize Malaysia's national anthem, Negaraku. What does this kind of cultural crossover tell us about the depth of our shared history and connection?
Thank you for that tidbit of info. I knew of the Solianos as a very well-loved and well-respected musical family here in Malaysia, but I did not know of the connection to the Negaraku. So that makes me very proud that we do have a connection to a musical heritage and a musical connection to that. And I think that illustrates the very strong relations that we have since I think even that has a longer history than our bilateral relations, in the sense that it was done even before we had the formal establishment of our bilateral relations. So that just shows that since time immemorial and even before, we've been exchanging visits to each other and having these cultural exchanges. So very happy to hear that.
Yeah. And just a bit of correction, earlier I said the daughter is actually his granddaughter Rachel, who continues the tradition till today. And you're right, there's all these nuggets in history which we are sort of always finding out about. Ambassador, I'd like to move on to ASEAN and the future that we have. How would you view the current momentum of ASEAN so far? There was this piece that came out in the news somewhat saying that the momentum was a little bit slow. What are your thoughts?
I think that ASEAN has a process that it follows, and ASEAN is very particular and respectful of that process. So I don't think that it's been slow. I think that ASEAN, and Malaysia as chair of ASEAN, as every chair of ASEAN does, follows the process that ASEAN has so painstakingly put in place. With Malaysia's theme of inclusivity and sustainability, we already have the ASEAN Community Vision, set to be launched. So Malaysia's been providing very good leadership, has been very providing, positive directions, and has been very adept in addressing, the challenges that have been arriving, and there are many. And you are at the same time, you're very careful, but at the same time, it's important that you able to adapt quickly to the challenges that come in, and that's how it's been.
Are there any specific areas where the Philippines and Malaysia are actively collaborating, or where the Malaysian chairmanship have opened up new opportunities for even closer cooperation?
Well, quite a lot of areas. Of course, the Philippines is incoming chair for 2026.
That's right.
So I always say to my Malaysian counterparts, please solve everything this year so that next year, it's going to be much easier for us.
Great, yeah.
Yes. But as I had, mentioned already, we work closely with Malaysia. In terms of security, we work closely with Malaysia in addressing the situation in South China Sea, especially through the Code of Conduct. And then, of course, the Philippines also as incoming chair is now part of the ASEAN Troika mechanism, which is the mechanism that ASEAN has put in place to ensure continuity in addressing the situation in Myanmar. So those are two particular ones. And then, of course, in terms of the economic challenges, we've been very supportive with Malaysia in having a regional response to these issues of tariffs.
Maybe if you could expand on that a little bit, because I think as just before the show we were just talking about how Malaysia and the tariffs as well as the Philippines, nobody is unaffected in that regard, and there's been a lot of talk about going in as a unified bloc, or whether countries should go and plead and put forward their own cases. So what are your thoughts, or what do you understand about developments in this area and discussions that are taking place?
Well, I very quickly after this was announced, the tariffs were announced, Prime Minister Anwar, had calls with all of his counterparts, and then Trade Ministry, all of the trade ministers at the meeting to determine, how do we move forward on this. And Malaysia, again, as I said, has shown excellent leadership in providing that, we do need to leverage the power of ASEAN as a regional, as a bloc, as an economic bloc. We're more than 600 million strong as a market, and we represent the fourth largest economic bloc in the world. So that's something that we work on together. But as how ASEAN goes, we can both work as a region, as an ASEAN bloc, but we also understand and realize that there are peculiarities to our bilateral relations with those with the countries involved. So we pursue both parallel together. Yeah.
And I think that's a good point, because different countries historically have different alignments. But would you agree then that the ASEAN platform, since it was established, has always been very important to ensure that everybody's at the table at the same time?
Very much agree with that. ASEAN platform, because it brings everyone to the table, and because it does so every year, is that you are able to hear, each other's views all the time, and that makes you also then define how you move along with your own path.
Right.
But always, whenever each ASEAN member moves on its own path, I believe that it does so, in the context of it being an ASEAN member. Yeah.
A couple of about 2 months back, I had opportunity to speak with the ambassador of Timor-Leste on this very show, and talking about Timor-Leste's potential ascension. And they seem quite confident, very much attending the ASEAN meetings. Do you have any thoughts about how the ASEAN countries are looking at Timor-Leste or the expansion of membership?
Well, of course, ASEAN has already, as you said, looking at the expansion of membership of ASEAN, and there is a long, and Timor-Leste has been invited as observer to participate in ASEAN meetings, and it's a steep learning curve for anyone. As I told you, ASEAN has this built-in and complicated and quite numerous processes. But we do hope, we're encouraged by Timor-Leste's progress, and we look forward to seeing them one day become part of ASEAN, a full member of ASEAN.
And even during that interview, the ambassador did say that there was no rush, because even they realized there were some structural issues they had to, and I suppose the ASEAN facilitation of this becomes very important. Ambassador, I'd like to ask you, we've got just about 2 minutes left, and perhaps one of the last questions would be, looking ahead, you've been here 1.5 years, what's your personal hope for the future of Malaysia-Philippines ties, especially for the young people and future leaders? If you could share some engagements you may have had on the ground, or the kind of visions or hope that have been expressed to you in your capacity, because I think we're also discussing how there's a big Filipino community here in this country that contributes to the economy, to culture, to education. So if you may share.
Yes, well, of course, my personal hope is that, we continue with the momentum that we have coming from the 60th anniversary of our relations. We continue with that, moving along with the relations based on mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual support. As far as the youth goes, I do believe that the youth, we sometimes we always say, what do we do for the youth? What future do we give to them? What future ASEAN do we give to them? What future relations do we give to them? But I believe that the youth, are just also agents of change. They're also the present. And so, in defining a future for our bilateral relations, we must ensure that we work with the youth, not just the youth. In terms of for instance, in the digital economy, in AI, we have so much to learn from the youth, and that's what I've seen. And so we have to have that perspective that what also can the youth teach us, so that then we're able to move the relations forward. And then I go back again to the people-to-people ties. I hope that they, move forward and carry on that people-to-people ties. And so for that means that we need to have, mechanisms that ensure this, educational exchanges, exchange of visits, platforms that will ensure the growing strength and continued strength of these relations.
Ambassador, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. That's all the time we have on today's episode. We hope those of you at home enjoyed this conversation and gained a deep understanding of Malaysia's enduring ties with the Philippines. I'm Daniel Rahman. This has been Diplomatic Dispatch, your window into the world of diplomacy and international affairs. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.